Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. I am personally very excited for my guest today, who I happen to know back in my college days, back in my sorority days. And so I truly love when worlds collide. It's really funny. My guest here today is Megan Holmes. So we were in a sorority together at Indiana University, go Hoosiers. And I randomly ran into her in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl. And so I feel like this was kind of like divine, Megan, in a way,
Yes.
for us to be reconnected. And as we were starting to chat more, I've learned about her own personal journey in supporting someone she loves very dearly, her dad. And she offers a really unique perspective, one that I love, love, love leaning into. And that is how we, the sandwich generation, begins to prepare for the caregiving role, not necessarily of that primary role, but really supporting our parents as they are supporting their spouse or loved ones through difficult times. So, Megan, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So, why don't you give us the lowdown? Your dad, from everything I've heard, really healthy guy. He has a really interesting, like, athlete background. Tell us a little bit more about him, like both kind of younger version of him and then kind of where things began to turn.
Yeah. So I come from a long line of Hoosiers. So my mom and dad actually met at IU. My dad was in a fraternity there and he rode in Little 500. So he's actually celebrating 50. I think this is the 50 years since they won Little 500 when his fraternity won. So that gives you kind of a picture of who he is. But he has always been kind of chasing these big things. Like he did the Kona Ironman, was in Little 500, did a lot of marathons, triathlons, that kind of thing. They kind of called him All the Way Jay was his name. Anyway, so my family is very close. And so this was something that was very a big hardship for our family and just kind of watching him, someone who's kind of been at this like pinnacle of like, health and fitness and always kind of modeled that. He was walking, 4 to 6 miles a day. So in October 2022, he was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis. And really, the kind of signs of it were like a persistent dry cough, almost to the point where, like, he's choking. So it was like, he started to cough more. And so that was like the initial thing that we saw. He was diagnosed by a pulmonologist after a pulmonary function test. His PFT level at that time was 85%. And a pulmonary function test is where you breathe into the tube and the thing goes up and down. So 85%, which is basically his ability of his lungs to supply oxygen to the bloodstream. And then that actually throughout this journey dropped to 16% within 2 years. So it was 2 years is long, but like for that to happen in 2 years is pretty significant. And then he got a second opinion at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and they put him on a medication that's supposed to kind of slow the development of pulmonary fibrosis. And he started that in January 2023.
Okay.
And then things kind of remained the same. The medication, I think, helped, but, ultimately didn't end up doing exactly what we needed. And so then in the fall of 2024 was when the coughing really started to like increase and he became lightheaded and this coloring was off and it was just kind of got to a scary point at that time. And we spend a lot of time together with my family up at the lake. So we kind of saw, his energy drain and this coughing and not being able to participate with the grandkids and stuff. So it was hard to watch, especially someone, like I said, who you've had in your mind as this person who's doing triathlons. They're walking 4 to 6 miles. And my mom was always right there by his side for all of this. She's always been, supporting him through these triathlons and then obviously now supporting him through kind of this journey as well. So then he went to IU Health and they kind of were determining if he was a candidate for a lung transplant. So in order to be a candidate for a lung transplant, you have to go through a lot of like testing. They ask you a lot of questions. It's kind of a lot of interviewing because it is a big deal to be put on that list and you do need to take it seriously that you're going to continue living the life to, make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your lungs. So he had to essentially like prepare and train for that.
Right.
Then went through the testing and they determined that he was a good candidate for it. They weed a lot of people out, I think, through that just because you have to take 20 to 30 meds a day after you go through a lung transplant. And they determined in December 2024 that he was a good candidate. And so they decided, that he would be put on the list. And so he got a call on December 23rd saying that they're ready to put him on the list. Is he ready to be put on it? Because at that point, it could be 2 days, it could be 2 months, because everything kind of has to match up for him to get the lungs from the donor.
Right.
So he decided to be put on the list on December 23rd, 2024. And he actually got a call 6 days after that they had a donor pair of lungs for him. So he
Wow.
had to be at the hospital within like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so that morning was a big whirlwind for our family and for my mom. Going through that's like the emotions are range from a lot of things. Like you're very happy and like because he's going to be having a life-changing, life-saving surgery. At the same time, you're sad because that means that another family lost someone that they love. And you think about it from their perspective, and you're thankful that they chose to be, a donor as well. So it's a range of emotions, but that was kind of how this, came to be.
And I'd imagine there's also a range of emotions because it's such a major surgery, which introduces additional risk.
Exactly. Yeah, and we hadn't seen my dad in any sort of, medical setting. This was kind of the first big thing that's happened in my parents, as they've gotten older. So to see that and knowing that we would have to see him intubated and, all of that on a ventilator and those kinds of things were definitely scary. And so that day was very interesting because you had to get there early, but then it was like you had to wait because they had to
Mhm.
have someone fly to the hospital where the lungs were, and they had to make sure that they were gonna be, the right fit for him, and then they bring them back on a helicopter, and it kinda has to move fast.
Question for you. Was your dad ever, like, resistant towards something this significant? A theme that I pick up on often within our parents' generation is that they can often be hesitant or resistant, perhaps prideful at times, not wanting to go as extreme. Kinda where was your dad on that spectrum of, "I'll do anything, let's do it right now," versus, wait and see, I think I'm fine."
Actually, when he first got diagnosed, it was a lot of, like, "I'm fine" kind of thing, and then I think there must have been a moment where he thought, like, he has young grandkids and, like, wanting to be there for them and, like, live this life and live longer for them because he was on oxygen towards the end there, and it was a lot of oxygen, and so, the kids were seeing him in a different light at that point, and so I think just being able to, like, look at that and look at our family and say, "Okay, like, I wanna live longer for them, and I wanna be around to see these things," and he's a very regimented person, so I knew that if he was gonna go through this, he was gonna be very serious about it and take it very seriously. There's a lot of people who may have had a lung transplant or something because they may have been a smoker, and then what if they go back to smoking? Like, that was never in his mind. It was like he was
Mhm.
gonna do this, and he was gonna do it the right way.
Yeah. What a blessing to have those little kids as just this quiet reminder of
Yes.
purpose and opportunity because I think it is easy if to convince yourself, well, maybe this is just how it's supposed to be. And thank God for those kids
Yeah.
to remind him that he still has many more years ahead. Okay, so let's jump back into the day of surgery and where you were with all of that.
Yeah, so everybody kind of came to my house. I've always been the one in my family that has been, I would say, the glue, which is kind of a term from our days at IU and the sorority. But so, kind of the glue of the family. Everybody came here. This was kind of the headquarters where we had the kids, and so we took turns kind of going to the hospital that day to spend time with him before he went back for the surgery. And so I stayed there. I really wanted to be there to support my mom. I knew this was a crazy day for her, and my brother was also going through some of his own grief, so supporting him too and being there for him and his girls. But I spent some time there all the way up until they have this point where you kind of walk back with them to go to this operation. There's a red line on the floor, and so the red line is where you leave and they have to go back. And so I was there up until that point when he crossed, like, the red line, which was very that was, like, a very emotional moment because it was like, anything could happen at that point, and he's done all that he can, and, like, this is the moment where we have to kind of put it into God's hands, and the surgeon's hands and just, wait the 8 hours and pray that everything goes well. So stayed there until that point. He went back to the surgery around 8 p.m. And then he got out of the surgery around 3:30 a.m. So it was a long day, a long night.
How does one occupy their time in
Yeah,
that span? Like, what
that's a good
it's easy
question.
to gloss over, but what are you actually doing to occupy your mind, to remain hopeful, to be there for your mom?
Yeah, so I sat with my mom in the waiting room. In the waiting room, the lights, are these bright fluorescent lights. Like it's not dim in there, it's not calming, and like this is overnight. We're talking like, 1 a.m.
Yeah.
So her and I just sat and kind of talked, and I wanted to give her kind of the ability to talk to me and vent to me, and what she's going through and see it from her. So we just spend a lot of time, talking about memories, and also just updating, family members too. There's a lot of people where they're kind of flooding with us with messages because they want to know that everything's going okay. How's it going? Have you heard from anyone? And for my role, I wanted to take it off her plate. I said, "Hey, let me take this over. Let me talk to these people and be kind of the one who communicates to them so that you can focus on, my dad and your role because
Mhm.
the caregiver role in this process is huge. They have meetings throughout like the lung transplant process and when they're going through like the training, you have to go through these meetings to make sure that like they have 3 dedicated caregivers."
Yeah, and I think it's, like, a very subtle thing that you said, but it's a really important thing that you said. It's not, "I asked my mom if I can do this." It's, "Mom, let me do this, otherwise, you're gonna become more overwhelmed," and
Mhm.
people are very well-intentioned in their questions, and they wanna know, and if the situation was reversed, we would want the same of our friends and family.
Yes.
Let me own this for you so you can be there for him emotionally and managing everything else,
Mhm.
and I think that that's a really critical piece of supporting caregivers is knowing and seeing opportunity, even in what feels small, like updates that
Yeah.
doesn't feel like a big deal, but when you have community and you have so many people that know and love your family,
Mhm.
those text messages, those emails, those phone calls can very quickly become burdensome.
Yes. Yeah, and she's not, like you said, the type to ask for someone to take something over, or she's always been like the epitome of strength and resilience and compassion. And so I knew that she wasn't going to ask me. Like I just knew that. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this off your plate. I'm going to be the one to communicate to your friends because I know that they want to know because they love him just as much as you do. But let me take that off of your plate for you.
I'm also curious, it's you've explained to me in the past that you and your mom have a very special relationship. You're very, very close. Did you feel any sort of shift and change in the way that you looked at her in the weeks leading up to this surgery while waiting in the waiting room? Like, and these are some really big, deep,
Mhm.
heavy things. Anything move inside of you through this experience?
Yeah, I mean, I thought a lot about, like, the love that they showed me when they were raising me and when I was little, and this was an opportunity for me to give that love back, that support back, because she has given so much of her life and just her love to us. I mean, she stayed home with us and my dad was always working and he was an entrepreneur, so he left to go back to work after dinner and that kind of thing. So she was always the one that was there. And I had 3 older brothers, so I was the only girl and I was the youngest. And so I've always taken on the role of like, my mom is my best friend and I will do what I can to support her. And I looked at this as an opportunity and a privilege to kind of give back to her and show her that love and support that she's always shown me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so deep, and I think one of the things that I've come to recognize in my own situation, albeit not one that has been driven by any sort of medical
Mhm.
emergency, is just how quickly those roles shift. And, like, where, like, it's not happening it hasn't happened completely, right, where you are now, like, the true caregiver of your parents,
Mhm.
but how you can see that responsibility slowly beginning to shift to you,
Mhm.
and you kinda look around and you say, "Oh, it's my turn."
Yes.
It's my turn to step up, and I, admire and appreciate the fact that you have this sort of relationship with your family where it's not seen as a burden.
Uh-huh.
It is seen as an opportunity, and I think you know what a blessing that is to be able to rise to that. Now, that doesn't mean it's not difficult, right? You have
Yes.
your own children, you have your own job, you have all these things, and it seems like it's a role that you very naturally stepped into as a result of the life that they were able to give you and
Mhm.
teach you about what this responsibility looks like. Okay, so let's go back. I'm sorry to keep ping-ponging a bit, but I wanna kind of extract some of these insights as we go. The surgery is complete. It's 3:30 in the morning. Walk us through what happens next.
Yes. So then he goes into the ICU, and that was probably like the hardest thing is to walk in there and see him in that state. Like I said, this is someone who we've seen do all these marathons and triathlons, and everything in your life kind of changes when you have a transplant. Like there's certain foods you can't eat anymore. There's certain things that you can't do. Like I said, we go to the lake, and I knew he couldn't get in the lake anymore, but walking in there and seeing him in that state was really difficult, and then I knew that how hard that was for my mom too. So, like, I'm looking at her, looking at him, and it's this whole, thing where it's like, I wanna be there for her because I know that her seeing him like this is even harder than it is on me because, they essentially grew up together and they've been together for so long, and to see your partner in life in that state is very difficult, and so from then, it was, just kind of being there. I would go every day to spend time with him and spend time with her. There would be times where I'd call her and say, "Hey, why don't you stay home and I'll go there," because I knew after he got out of the hospital, he had to have someone with him 24/7 for a whole month and a half. And so in my mind, I was like, "Hey, the hospital, he's in good hands there, and if one of us can be there with him and you can stay home and get some rest and prepare for what the next month and a half are going to look like." So
And did she take you up on that offer?
she did a couple times, yes. I think it was hard for her, and then, it's one thing to be like, "Hey, get some sleep," but when you have someone who's in that state in the hospital, it's hard to go home and relax and shut your mind off and try to go to sleep and get rest too.
Well, and caregiver burnout is such a real thing, and caregivers typically are so quick to neglect their own health,
Mhm.
sleep, diet, exercise, and so having
Yeah.
a caregiver have someone like yourself, that secondary caregiver, kind of that one step, not you're not one step removed, but kind of
Yeah.
that just a handoff is so critical so that she can recharge her batteries to show
Mhm.
up best for him and to make sure that he will be successful in the transition home from hospital rehab back to his everyday life.
Yes.
And I feel like that's also something that is another really important tip because
Mhm.
it could be I'm sure, it could be very challenging to tell your mom, "Hey, mom, it's time for you to rest. It's time,
Yes.
you know, you're gonna have to leave. You have to allow other people to step up and step into this role, not because you're not capable, but because we all need the best out of you, and this is a great opportunity to allow other people to have this moment." And it sounds like that resonated with her, thankfully.
Yes. Yeah, and I knew she loves going for long walks, and, I knew for her mental health, she needed to do that. So it was the winter in Indiana, but at the
Oof.
same time, I was like, take some time, go walk on a treadmill, take a walk because I know that that's important to her and her mental health is to get outside and go for a walk, think all of that. So,
Also, Megan, who was supporting you during this time? I mean, you have young children. Again, you're a working mom. How are you actually balancing the day-to-day to-dos?
so I would say my husband really stepped up and he didn't ask questions. He knew what his role was going to be. It was like that morning when I got the call that my dad was having a lung transplant, he kind of just jumped right into that role and knew what he was supposed to do. So he definitely took a lot off my plate. Luckily, I had, flexibility with work and all of
Good.
that. And then my sister-in-law too, she was really great with watching the kids and helping through that because it kind of happened at that point where it was still holiday break. So it was like the kids were home from school. There was a lot of not any structure in our house.
Right.
So she was helping to manage the chaos. And I think I would say she and my husband were the ones who kind of took care of home base, where then my brothers and I could spend time with my mom and my dad.
Well, and good for you for, kind of relenting on that control, especially during holiday season where I know it's very challenging for moms to let go because it is
Yes.
such a special time and there is no school, and so you're trying to create memories and special moments for your kids,
Mhm.
and it was a season that perhaps that wasn't the ultimate priority.
Mhm.
Alright, so talk me through more. So you're kind of not rotating shifts, but giving your mom breaks where you can, and then how does he progress?
Yeah, so he actually progressed very well. I mean, there were I think a couple setbacks, like in the first day or two, where they thought they were going to be able to take him off the ventilator, but they couldn't because of certain things. I was the one who kind of came in there and I would play like he loves Frank Sinatra. So I would play like Frank Sinatra for him and show him pictures and videos just to kind of keep his spirits up. But he would tell you that like the worst part of it was having that tube in his throat. Like he wanted it out and like he was alert enough where he was like, I want this out. Like it felt like
Yeah.
he was, choking or something. And so,
Well, it's just uncomfortable. He's conscious,
yeah.
so he knows, like, this is not this is artificial.
Exactly, yeah, and then after that, he progressed really well. I mean, they took the tube out, and then he moved to a different floor where he was able to start, like, a liquid diet. They had to do a lot of bronchoscopies to make sure that there was nothing in the lungs and that, everything was working well, and from that point, they wanted to get him up and start walking around, and so they gave him challenges of how far to walk, around the floor, and if you give my dad a challenge, like, he's going to go all the way with it, so he definitely was doing a lot of the exercises, following all the rules, but I think part of it was he wanted to meet those challenges so much that, like, he would overexert himself, and he would be hesitant to say, like, he was tired, if he was in pain, and whereas I think our generation, like, if we're tired or we're in pain, like, we're gonna tell the nurse and the doctor, but for some reason, I think that generation is, like, they hesitate to show any sign of, like, that they need help or that they
Yeah.
aren't doing well. Like, they wanna always appear that they are strong and that they are doing fine, so to say. So there were times where I was there, I was like, "Dad, like, be honest, like, tell them, like, are you in pain? Are you like, is this hard for you?" And so encouraging him to be a little bit more vulnerable and, like, say when things aren't going well or he wasn't feeling well because I think he wanted to just portray that everything was fine,
Well, he
so
probably wanted to go home, It's
yes.
like, okay, if I tell them what they wanna hear, then maybe I get to go home and figure out my new normal, and from
Yes.
everything that you shared, which is why his background as an athlete is so relevant.
Mhm.
He's competitive, like, he's competitive
Yes.
with himself. Like, how do you turn that part
Mhm.
off when that's who you are? You're wired to
Yeah.
go and to be the most optimal version of yourself. So it totally makes sense, and it's also
Yes.
why someone like you in the room is so important
Yes.
because I do think there's a tendency to just wanna say, I think I'm supposed to say that I'm good,
Mhm.
and so I'm going to say that I'm good." It's a lot more
Exactly.
uncomfortable to say, "Actually, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about
Yeah.
fill in the blank."
Yeah, and I think that also was kind of how my mom is too, because
Yeah.
there was a meeting that we had to have with, like, the pharmacist and, like, his doctors, and they have a whole transplant, like, support team. So everybody kind of came in there, and they wanted to go over all of the medications that he was gonna take, after he left the hospital. And my mom was like, "Oh, like, it'll be fine. I got it. Like, we'll be fine in there." And I was like, "This is gonna be a lot of information." Like, and I mean, you're aging too, so, like, I think it's important that I sit there too and hear this information just as, like, someone to be a backup, and so I was like, "Let me come to this meeting." So, it was towards kind of the end when he was, like, about to get out of the hospital, and they were going over every single medication and, like, I'm talking, like, 20, 30 pills a day, and so, I mean, I have trouble even remembering, 1 pill a day, so it's like,
Yeah.
I can imagine how hard it is. So they get him, like, a pill case, and he has to go each week on Sunday, he has to sit there and put the pills in, like, that has and it takes usually, like, 2 hours to do it when you first start, and so at first, my mom had to do that for him because he was on medication, so she was doing all of that and, putting the medications in there, but I wanted to be there as a backup to hear how this goes, so if she couldn't do it for some reason or if she needed a break, like, I could be the one to help out with that too.
Yeah, I think that's so wise. A second set of ears, second set of hands, really making sure everyone's on the same page about what they heard is so important because sometimes doctors and nurses, they have a tendency they're
Mhm.
going through the motion, and I think they forget that for the average American, this is all like,
Yes.
you're learning everything very, very quickly, and it
Yeah.
can be very difficult to absorb all the information and
Mhm.
kind of figuring out, "All right, how do I prioritize what they said, and what do we need to do next?" And, of course, we're in a generation where, we know how to navigate Amazon and tips and tricks of, different medicine bottles and
Yes.
apparatuses that can make your life easier, and I think that sometimes our parents kind of overlook that there's so much innovation, technology, products, education out there that we can gather, but we need to
Yes.
have like a baseline of what's expected so that
Yeah.
we can do our job as kind of that secondary caregiver and to say, "Oh, I actually have the perfect thing that dad can use that this will help him stay organized, take a little bit of relief off of mom, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera."
Yes, yeah. So after that, he was able to leave the hospital, so then they went to a hotel that was, like, very nearby, so they had to stay within a couple of miles of the hospital for up to 2 months. I think he was there for a month and a half because he was doing very well. So they lived in a hotel for a while, which again, January in Indiana, and the weather is terrible. It's hard for my mom to get out and exercise, so they spent a lot of time inside a small hotel room, and my dad couldn't go many places because his immune system is down in
Mm.
January in Indiana. There's lots of germs. So I think that was also a big shift for my mom was they are a very active couple. And I mean, they were going out to dinner and going on vacations and certain things that like aren't going to look the same now. And I think that was hard for my mom to face that reality of like, there's certain parts of their life that aren't gonna be the same as they were before because we need to be more cautious and because we do need to think about this every day.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big shift as well.
And so they spent a month and a half in the
Mhm.
hospital, and then he came home right away? What happened from there?
Yeah, so they lived in the hotel, and he went to what they called it was like pulmonary training, cardiology kind of training for him. So he went and like walked and did pulmonary function tests for about a month and a half, and then they were able to go home, which was really exciting. I think they were both just excited to get back in some sort of routine, but obviously the
Yeah.
routine looks a lot different. So going home and going back to kind of their new normal. And I think also then my mom, having been by his side for so long, getting comfortable with leaving him, because she had to be there by his side 24/7. And then when they say, okay, like now he can drive, now he can, spend time at home by himself. And then she has to be comfortable with that after she's, been by his side for so long.
Yeah.
And I think, even just leaving him to go do something like at first was hard for her because she was scared of what could happen or after being by his side for that long. So yes, they did go back to Muncie, Indiana, where they live, and everything was going well. So they've been really well. I mean, we're very lucky and blessed that he has had such a wonderful, I guess, adjustment to the new lungs. He's spent a lot of time now thinking about like back on the journey and how he can honor, the donor and their family and giving back that way. And I mean, just everything's been put into a different perspective for me and I think everybody else in my family. This was a huge shift in just like my mindset as like a mom, as a daughter, as a business owner now. Like it was just a big shift in kind of everything, the way that I look at the world, so
Yeah. Well, you went through something so significant, so potentially scary and
Mhm,
dramatic, all the things, and I'm sure that that is the experience has, again, altered the way that you wanna show up for others. I mean, I would imagine that supporting your mom has in ways provided another perspective on how to show up for other people in your life that are going through difficult things. Because I think the hard reality for the sandwich generation is realizing that, sadly, these things don't slow down.
mhm, yeah,
They they keep happening, and so it's, like, almost like developing, like, you have, like, this more refined point of view because you've been thrust into it earlier.
mhm,
And at the same time, it should lend well in your ability to show up for the people you love beyond family because you have experience knowing not just the challenges of showing up and sharing updates, but the challenges of navigating emotion
mhm,
and that innate responsibility that a mother to their husband might feel and that innate kind of mama bear feeling that's really, really hard to kind of take someone's guard down. So it's almost you
mhm,
like you can guide your friends and other family members as they experience things like this in the future because again, sadly, it is inevitable and
mhm,
it is something that we all have to go through. And it sounds like in this situation, you between your siblings and frankly just how local you are to your parents,
mhm,
it's such a great situation to like begin to transition back into.
yes. Yeah, and, I mean, honestly, the way I learned to be the way that I am towards my mom and being that support for her is from her because I watched this happen with my grandmother. So, my mom and my grandmother were very close her mom were very close, and towards the end of her life, my mom was there. Like, she was the person, like, she was supporting her, and she was, kind of her caregiver, and they were very, very close, and so watching my mom do that is, like been was very special to me because now I can kind of know I'm that was an example for me of how I wanna be. So, everything that I've learned about, like, being a caregiver and a support for her is from her. Like, I wanna be the same compassionate, resilient, supportive person that she was, like, to her mom too. So, it's been kind of a thing watching the generations too, so.
Yeah, she modeled it, and I think that's
Mhm,
actually a really great positioning in the future. It's like, "Hey, I learned this from you. I'm pushing you, I'm asking to do these things, not because I don't know you're capable of it, but because I know that this is my role now. This is my responsibility, and I
mhm.
wanna model this for my children too." I think
Yes.
that the relationship between, kids our kids' age and grandparents is it, like, tells you everything you need to know about life. If you're blessed enough to be in city or a community where you get to be with your grandparents and you get to watch how your parents take care or how, how we take
Yeah.
care of our parents, I mean,
Y
it's magical. It's
yes.
magical because
It really
it
is.
is like the foundation of how we're wired as humans to care for one another. And so I think what you said earlier resonates. It certainly resonates with me when you can model that for your kids, when you can your kids can see that, it should make you feel really good about kind of the type of humans that you're raising because they
Yeah.
also need to know that hard things happen.
Mhm.
It's not always happy. And in fact, sometimes it's really, really hard, but this is what we do. We come together, we show up because that's what family is.
Mhm. Yes. No, I totally agree. And I mean, just now, like watching, we went to Florida to celebrate, like, it'd been a year, since his lung transplant, and we went to Florida. And I mean, you have to think now about your kids being sick and stuff and being around him. And luckily, like, everything went so smoothly and the kids were all healthy. And we had such a great time just reflecting on like the past year and just like I said, the perspective that we have now as a family and how life is short and life is precious and being able to be there and support the ones you love. It's definitely changed everything in my life, being
Yeah.
that support for my mom and for my dad and just going through the whole experience too.
Megan, as we begin to wrap up here, any final piece of advice or call to action that you would recommend for someone that finds themselves in your role?
I would just say, like you were saying, tell them like what you're going to do. Like, this is what I'm going to do to help you. Because that generation is not gonna ask for help a lot of times. They're not gonna be outwardly, like, saying, "Oh, like, can you go pick this up or can you cook a meal?" Like, you have to be the one to tell them, like, "This is how I'm gonna help." And I also think just it's a privilege and to be able to care for, like, your mom or your parent. I didn't want it to ever feel or look like a burden because it's not. Like, the opportunity I have to be able to spend time with both my mom and my dad now, I don't take that for granted, and I think being able to care for them as they get older and watch them go through that is an opportunity and a privilege that I'm taking on, and this whole thing has helped put it all into what that should look like and how I can be the best support and caregiver for them.
Yeah. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Again, I think that your story will resonate with so many people that are finding themselves in that messy middle of transitions and health and taking care of parents while also taking care of young kids.
Yep.
It's a really important conversation to have. We all want to do best by our parents, but it's not always easy to know what to do, how to do it, how to say it. So I think you really provided some very, very practical advice for people and you something that you said that I think is so important is, again, this is less about asking for permission. It's more about just knowing your role and doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you ask for permission, you will be waiting a very, very long time. It
Yeah.
was such a joy seeing you, talking to you. I will continue to pray that your dad continues along a healthy path. Thank you so much again for being here today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jordan. It was great.